Hello everyone. I, Forum Patel from LG School of Law would like to extend my warm welcome to every viewer. Now friends, this is the third session of the copyright laws under the intellectual property rights subject. In the previous two sessions, we went through the history of the copyright laws in our country, the meaning of the term copyright, then the term which is there for the protection of the copyrighted work, the meaning of the author under the act, or rather who can be considered as an author, and the importance of the originality under the copyright laws. So friends, in the last session I stopped with the question that what are the rights which are protected under the copyright law. So friends, let's get started with the understanding of the rights under this concept. As you can see on the screen, my friends, there are two kinds of the rights which are available with the author under the Copyright Act. There are two kinds of rights. The first is the moral rights. The second is the economic right. The moral rights are there to protect the personality of the author. That means morality has been given an importance in any of the law in our country, which is not even excluded when it is about the copyrights. And the second, which is economic right, to bring the economic benefit, of course. Intellectual property laws have been developed and evolving in our country with a drastic or major upbringing in the economy of the country. That means it is very important to protect the economic rights of the author along with the moral rights, of course, so as to create the whole environment of the creativity and to give a boost to that environment at the same time. When we are talking about the moral rights, my friends, the right of the authorship, the right of the integrity and inalienable rights can be considered when we are talking about the moral rights. The digital manipulations or no rights for the display, etc. are considered to be the rights of the integrity. When we are talking about the right of the authorship, what can be considered under that concept? The moral rights which are protected under this law would be extended to the right of the authorship. The author, the original creator, or rather the original work creator of the creative work which has been protected under the Copyright Act will be given to the person, to the author only, and that is what you call the protection of their moral rights. The next is the right of the integrity. What do you mean by integrity, my friends? It means truthfulness, honesty. That is the integrity of a humankind. When we are talking about the copyright laws and the integrity, right, that means no manipulation can be adopted or no manipulation can be tolerated along with any of the distribution or display, etc. of the copyrighted work. When that kind of right is protected under this law, that will be considered under the concept of the moral rights. The next is inalienable rights, my friends. When the work of the copyright work is original in its own nature, the rights which has to be there with the author needs to be inalienable. That means absolute in its own nature. No other distribution of the rights would be tolerated under the law until and unless the same has been done with the legal proceedings. So these are certain rights which has been covered under the concept of the moral rights. Now when we are talking about the economic rights, what are the other concepts that would be covered under that right? As you can see on the screen, my friends, the economic right which has been protected under the copyright law is the right of the reproduction, right of the distribution or issuing copies, and the right of the communication to the public. That means making copies, that is an edition of the novel or storage in the computer memory, etc., which is considered to be the reproduction right, will be there with the author only. The right of the distribution or even the digital distribution or issuing of the different copies would also be considered under the economic rights, and public performances, internet communications, and even social media communications or rather social media performances or broadcasting would be covered under the right of the communication to the public. When we are talking about the broadcasting rights, just hold on to that thought. We shall be understanding that concept later on in the session. When we are talking about the economic rights, my friends, with any kind of the property, its owner may decide how it is to be used, of course, and others can use it lawfully only if they have the owner's permission often through a license. Now, the owner's use of the property must, however, respect the legality, which is recognized rights and the interest of the other members of the society. So, the owner of the copyright protected work may decide how to use the work and may even prevent the others from using that same work which has been protected under the copyright law without due permissions. Now, national laws usually grant copyright owners exclusive rights to allow the third party to use their work, subject to the legal recognition of that right and interest of the others. Now, most of the copyright law states that the author or the other rights owner have the right to authorize or prevent certain acts in relation to that work. Now, the rights owner can authorize or prohibit are that reproduction of the work in various forms such as the printed publications or sound recording, etc. Next is about the distribution of the copies, public performances, broadcasting and translation or even adoption of the work such as in the case of the novels. The following section explains the rights in a greater details. So when we are talking about the rights of the reproduction, distribution and rental and importations, the right of the copyright owner to prevent others from making copies of their original work without the due permission is the most basic right which is protected by the copyright legislation. The right to control the act of the reproduction, be it the reproduction of the books by a publisher or the manufacturer of by record producer or compact discs containing recorded performances of musical work, is the legal basis for many forms of exploitation of the protected works. The next is the right of the public performances, broadcasting communication to the public and making available the copies about the same copies to the public. Now, public performance is considered under many national laws to include any performances of the work at a place where the public is or can be present, or at the place not open to the public, but where a substantial number of persons outside the normal circle of a family or close acquaintances they are present. Now, the right of the public performance entitles the author or other copyright owners to authorize live performances of that particular work. That means that the translation of the rights or right to make the adoption of that particular right would be also known as the economic right, which has been covered with the protection under the copyright laws. But when we are talking about the right of the broadcasting, it covers the transmission for the public reception of the sounds or of the image or sounds by the wireless means, whether by radio or television or satellite, etc., etc. This right of the broadcasting are considered to be the related right under the copyright laws, which we will be dealing further in the session. As you can see on the screen, my friends, the economic right, other than those three protected or distributed or given divided rights, there are other all these rights which has been given under the scope of the economic rights, which is about the adoption of the rights, which includes the abridgment or comic formats or conversation into author, that is literary to drama. Then right to make the cinematography, film or sound recording, or the translation right, the rental right or release right or for the original artistic work. That means, my friends, that even the protection will be extended to a person who is adopting or even converting the book or a novel into a film. The right under the copyright law would be extended even in that case. These rights are very well known and are covered under the concept of the economic rights other than the moral rights, of course. So when we are talking about the translation and the adoption of the rights, now a work which is protected by the copyright also needs or requires permission from the right owner when we are talking about the translation. Translation means the expression of a work in a language other than the original version, of course. Adaptation is generally understood as the modification of the work to create another work, for example, adapting a novel to make a film, as I talked before, and any other such conditions. These two terms, that is translation and adaptation, are the term themselves which is protected by the copyright. In order to publish a translation or adaptation, permission has to be obtained or it must be obtained from both the authors of the copyright in the original work and the owner of the copyright in the translation or adaptation also. This is the question that has been arised because of the new digital technological revolutions in our country, because the new technological revolution has given many other opportunities for the original work to be publicly posted or broadcasted on the social medias or on any other networks. Then what are the protection which is to be given to the original author for that work? So friends, the extension of the economic right has to be divided, as you can see on the screen, into all these subdivisions. When we first talked about the moral rights, my friends, the Berne Convention in Article 6 requires its member to grant the authors the following kind of the right: the right to claim authorship of the work and the right to object any distortion or modification of that particular work. These are the rights which has been protected for the integrity, or rather for the protection of the integrity of the author. That is what you call the protection of the moral rights. These and some other rights which are granted in the national law are generally known as the moral rights of the author. Even the international conventions has tried and given protection or extension for the protection of moral rights at any level. The reason being that economic rights are important along with the moral rights. The moral rights cannot be given a secondary importance when we are talking about the integrity or originality in the Copyright Act. But when we are talking about the rights which are protected under the copyright concept, how can we not discuss the limitations and the exceptions to these rights? There are several types of the limitations and exceptions to the copyright protection. First, the certain category of the works are excluded from the copyright protection. Works that are excluded from the copyright if they are not fixed in a tangible form, of course. For example, a work of the choreography would only be protected once the movement were written down in the dance notation or recorded on the video. In some other countries, my friends, the text of the laws as well as the courts and the administrative decisions are also excluded from the copyright protections. Other than this, certain particular act of exploitations that are usually required the right owner's permissions may, under circumstances are specified in the law, be carried out without the owner's permission. They are the free use and non-voluntary licenses. What do you mean by free use? That means which carries no obligation to compensate the right owner for the use of the work without their permission. That means the work is there for the free usage in the society or in the public at large. The second one is non-voluntary or compulsory licenses, which requires that compensation to be paid to the right owner for non-authorized exploitations. These are the exceptions to the rights which are available to the copyright owner when we are talking about the protection under the laws. Now, when we are talking about the free usage under the exceptions, what would be that? For an example, the use which are like illustration or for teaching purposes. For an example, if I am taking some help of the materials to teach, to even expand the illustrations, then that cannot be conferred or considered as the infringement of the copyright laws or copyright of any other person. Or for the purpose of the news reporting, if any other person is taking the advantage or any other help of the work, then that cannot be considered as the infringement. That means, my friend, that these are the exceptions to the rights which has to be granted to the authors. These are the exceptions, these are the limitations which are there available to the rights which are there under the copyright concept, my friends. Now you would be asking me the question that why is it so? These are certain categories that I just modified that they deal with the fair usage concept or rather fair dealing concept. In general, the limitations or exceptions, they allow the use of the work without the right owner's permission. Now if I am teaching here, if I have to refer a viewpoint or rather if I have to refer a notebook, I cannot run to the author and ask for the permission. That would not be the extensive activity that I would be doing. If I am doing something for a social purpose, for a social cause, which is of course allowed by the law, then that would be considered as a limitation to the rights or an exceptions of those rights, which has to be given to the original author. Even this protection has been confined by the international Berne conventions. When we are talking about the copyright, of course, they have been put as a limitation, explicit limitation or an exception under Article 9 subclause 2 of the Berne conventions, my friends. That means even the national laws and even the international laws, they have the codified and kept as the expressed limitations or exceptions to the right of the owner under this concept, my friends. So this was all about the concept of the rights under the concept of the copyright, of course. Along, I would like to just briefly note that there are two kinds of the rights available to the copyright owner. The first, moral rights. Second, economic right. Moral rights are also considered to be the integrity rights, and the economic rights, they are extended to many other performs or formats due to the expansion and development in the society. There are certain limitations and exceptions to these rights under the copyright concept. The Berne Conventions at the international level is also providing the guidelines and the guidance for the copyright protection or the copyright concept. Friends, in the next session, we shall be starting with the ownership of the rights, or rather the exceptions to who can be considered as an author and why. Till then, stay tuned and keep learning.